everyone, it's Sevy, and Spiral Abyss is back with a vengeance in version 3.7, so it's time once again for another guide. I was away on a break, hence the lateness of this guide, but rest assured the 4-star runs have not died yet. Though I'll be using certain teams, this guide is meant to highlight the attack patterns of the enemies here and strategies you can use against them. I will be tackling only floor 12 here, since floor 11 can be achieved through strategies from prior Abyss cycles like crowd control techs and elemental counters. Floor 12, on the other hand, is quite the hellscape and features some new and worse enemy combos. And to avoid having to verbally repeat my usual general tips for doing Spiral Abyss, I'll just flash them on screen here and you can pause to take a quick read. By the way, this cycle's blessing is a mark on enemies that can be inflicted via normal attacks, essentially causing enemies to take true damage at intervals. You can exploit this by spamming normal attacks throughout your rotations. Anyway, let's get to it. Alright, so what's going on in this abyss and what makes it difficult? Firstly, even if you're able to group up enemies properly and learn their attack patterns, there are lots of parts here that still rely on RNG to get the best case scenario for a good run, which can require a lot of resets, like really a lot of resets. One very frustrating chamber, and for many, the worst one too, is the Cryo and Hydro Heralds in the 12-1 second half. You can get especially bad instances where you're perma-frozen and one of them just decides to one-shot you. It also restricts your team quite a bit since you need certain elements to counter their elemental shields. And so, if you aren't able to full star the first floor, it's totally okay to just focus on surviving their attacks so that you can move on to Chamber 2, then come back later to get a better run in Chamber 1 against the Heralds with the right elemental counters on your team. Then a quick overview of the enemies we're in for here for the rest of the floor. 12-1 first half has 2 waves of Whopper Flowers and 2 waves of Primal Constructs. It might seem like a lot, but with proper grouping, you can get through it. The second half is again that very cursed combination of Cryo and Hydro Abyss Heralds. 12-2 is actually going to be the easiest chamber by comparison, with a single Terror Shroom on one side and then Thundering Manifestation on the other side. So these are bosses that you've probably fought in the open world, and you can use similar strategies here. They have also appeared in Abyss before, and so you might be familiar with their attack patterns already. Then 12-3 first half gives you 2 waves of double Consecrated Beasts. Yes, that is a total of 4 Consecrated Beasts, and they will very obnoxiously push you around. And then you get to finish off in the second half with the Iniquitous Baptist. So some general tips to deal with these halves. First of all, dying is a major risk in both halves, so you need a reliable healer and or shielder, plus dodging and iframing. Iframing helped me a lot here, so make sure your units have enough energy to get their bursts up when necessary in order to take advantage of those iframes. The first half's constructs and chicken can be countered via Quicken reactions, so using a Quicken based team here can be to your advantage. In this half, I used Lisa, Fischl, Yao Yao, and Sucrose, basically a Quicken Aggravate template. Then the second half is where it gets tricky because, again, you're encountering restrictions with the elements for the enemies. You mainly want elements that can counter the Abyss Heralds, the Thundering Manifestation, and the Baptist. The Abyss Heralds are Cryo and Hydro, so shield breaking will be their major hurdle. The fastest way to counter them is with Pyro and Cryo respectively. These aren't the only ways, of course. Against the Cryo shields, you have Electro, Animo, or Geo, but these are way slower than just using Pyro. And then against the Hydro shields, Dendro is technically the more effective elemental counter, like just for Hydro, more effective than Cryo even. But note that Dendro doesn't break Cryo shields, and in terms of a cohesive team reaction combination, Pyro and Cryo can get you Melt and Reverse Melt. Pyro, Electro, Geo, and Animo could also work against Hydro shields, but they are slower than Cryo or Dendro. And then the Thundering Manifestation is a bit easier to counter. It's basically immune to Electro, and you can just out DPS it with many different team archetypes. However, due to the first floor being restrictive, that limits what you can comfortably bring, but then you could always just take it slow, survive the first chamber, and then come back with the more effective team against the manifestation. The last chamber chamber has a Baptist in it, and the patterns of its shield seems to be cryo, hydro, pyro, and then repeat. So from what I can tell, it never used an electro shield, and that was pretty consistent. So that's another restriction in that you need to bring the right counter elements against them. It is very possible and even likely that you'll have to redo the first and third chamber's second halves with different teams in order to get high star clears or full star clears, but it's also possible with a single team, especially if you've invested in them. So for the second half, I used a reverse melt team with Rosaria, Bennett, Shangling, and Kaya, using that pyro against the cryo shields and electro, and then the cryo against the hydro, electro, and pyro to some extent. Of course, your teams can greatly vary depending on what you have available, who you've invested in, who your 5-star counterparts are, so let me know in the comments what team you used. Now, on to the Abyss run. Starting with 12-1 first half, this spawns groups of enemies in 4 waves, so having an animal unit to group them up to take your AoE damage will be a massive help. When I started, I moved back from the key to let the Whopper Flowers teleport to me, but I didn't taunt them too far to the edge of the map, and instead made them spawn somewhere between the center point and lower edge. The reason for that is because the next set of Whopper Flowers will spawn there as well, and you can maximize your abilities by also catching them the moment they spawn.
Stand clear.
Then 3 primal constructs will spawn in the center-ish area. If you have someone like Kazuha, then you can easily bring them together. But if not, you can go to either the left or the right one and face them all in a line. The farthest one will eventually start moving towards you, and they should be grouped closely together enough for you to simultaneously hit. When the last constructs spawn, repeat the same strategy. I'll admit I had a lot of retries to get good groupings, so if it's bad for you, just reset, because effective grouping really helps a lot.
As you wish, mate.
Let's spark things up a little. Come a little closer.
If one goes invisible though, I just rely on my AoE attacks to inflict Quicken and disable them. They tend to follow you anyway, so they're not always too far, and if you applied a debuff or effect on them, that helps make them easy to spot. In the second half, we start with a Cryo and Hydro Mage. I basically go back where I started and edge bait these two so they teleport to me and right beside each other. From there, I can do my rotations and setup.
Eat this! Nice and spicy.
Don't get frostbite.
Once they're dead, the 3 Heralds will spawn. I recommend focusing on the Hydro Herald and pushing it towards the others. The sooner you get rid of it, the sooner you can prevent them from freezing you, rather than trying to get both Cryos first. It's mostly a matter of dodging skills, tanking it with shields, healing fast, and iframing to stay alive. A shielder will definitely provide more comfort, but I personally opted for more damage and just relied on healing and iframes. With a Cryo unit too, at least you can temporarily freeze the Hydro Herald. The Heralds naturally approach you, so grouping them won't be hard. Keeping them in your sight can also help to observe when they're about to do major attacks and avoid them if possible. If you're only damaging them one at a time, that might help you focus more, but it's going to be a slower run. So try hitting them simultaneously as often as possible to maximize the time. With only the Cryo Heralds left, I can at least rest easy knowing I won't be frozen anymore. In my case, Bennett was a huge help thanks to his low skill cooldown and C6 infusion, leading to a lot of pyro application.
Let's light it up.
The second chamber should be much easier compared to the first and third chamber. Starting with a Jade Plume Terror Shroom, inflicting Quicken on this chicken is the easiest strategy against it, since that will make it enter into rage mode and disable it for a long time while lowering its resistance, so that's your window to do a lot of damage. However, its attacks can be RNG. The worst one is if it charges across the floor and you end up spending time chasing it. In that case, you can just reset your run for a faster clear when it does that charging attack. If you bring another team that can't do Quicken, then you won't be able to use this strategy, but you can simply just out-damage it. And then focus the final seconds of this half recharging your unit's bursts so that they're all ready for the third chamber. Then the second side has the Thundering Manifestation. You also want to get familiar with this one's attack patterns, since some are better dodged while others are better iframed. For example, its attack with 2 screens coming to sandwich you, you can dash out of them. For the attack with the Electro Box targeting you, I essentially powered through it by continuously healing. But compared to the previous chamber, this one is a lot easier to clear, it's more straightforward, and it mostly involved me following it around while trying to deal damage. So your main priority should once again be charging your team's bursts to prepare for the final chamber. If you get a bad run, especially because of the Thundering Manifestation's attacks catching you off guard, then thankfully this chamber is easy to reset. I sort of treat this as an energy recharging chamber because the bosses are way easier than the previous and next chamber, so you have a lot of time to get energy back. Basically, the bosses here are quite familiar and aren't that complicated to deal with. Now comes the final chamber with the very obnoxious Consecrated Beasts. I started by aggravating them, and the Dendro Beast usually gets to me first, so I have to dodge its first hits. I put down my setup here and try to keep them both in place as much as possible. It gets a bit dangerous if the beasts push you against the wall until you can't move, so you can try to avoid that by positioning the beasts between yourself and the wall. But sometimes it's unavoidable and you will be unable to move, which can result in resets. One funny thing that happened here is that since their attacks are Dendro and Hydro, Dendro cores were getting dropped around me. Luckily, since I had brought Electro units, I was able to turn those into Hyper Blooms to add more damage.
Absorption test. Wings of darkness.
And then once I managed to get past the first wave, I similarly edge-baited the second wave and did my setup there, trying as much as possible to keep them within my AoE. I tried to be very conscious of my character's HP, swapping out if one of them takes a major hit, and relying on my healer to keep everyone healthy. And then if the beasts drop an elemental crystal, attack it to disable the beast, and that will be a good opportunity to deliver a lot of damage. Be sure to take advantage of it.
Absorption test.
As you wish.
Swirl, Mark 2. Oh, you, Blade, you're up. Ready, go. Stand clear. Oz, reveal thyself. Try not to.
Finally, in this last half, we have the brand new Iniquitous Baptist. The shield seems to have a consistent pattern of Cryo, Hydro, then Pyro. So it's a matter of breaking the shields with their counter elements and just unloading as much damage as you can while he's paralyzed from the shield break. In my case, it was easy to break the first two shields with my combined Pyro and Cryo applications. However, where I had a lot of difficulty in was its Pyro shield, since my only counter was Cryo, which wasn't as fast. I knew that would be a problem, so my best strategy was simply to brute force it by spamming Cryo abilities. However, you'll notice that he's disabled the longest after breaking the Pyro shield, so by then it's best to prepare your bursts and even precast it right before the shield is destroyed to make the best use of that window. Depending on the team you brought, you might have an Electro or Hydro unit that could help break the shield way faster. Pay attention as well to its telegraphed attacks, as those could really kill you if you're too focused on breaking his shields but not dodging his attacks.
One more sin upon your soul.
You can't run.
Sin be washed away.
Teamwork is dreamwork. Lights out.
I ended it with a pretty clutch run, but it could definitely be faster. And that's it for this Abyss Cycles Floor 12. Even before getting to it, or even before having a chance to try it out myself since I was away on break, I heard so much about how bad this floor was. And really, I struggle to imagine what more Hoyo can do to annoy players with the upcoming Abyss cycles. I feel like they've been getting more and more intense, or worse, for lack of a better word, or that is the general sentiment, So my reflection on this is the team requirements, massively annoying mob combinations, and RNG that ended up with me having a lot of resets. These 4 stars are quite well invested in, thankfully, but the 4-star selection did limit a lot of my viable teams and I was actually doubtful I could really finish it, so it's a relief I still got through it and my blessings were pretty lucky, which helped quite a bit. Anyway, the next Abyss video will likely be a no limitation clear of this Abyss, which means trying to use different team types and maybe find a way to use the current feature 5 stars as well. That's going to be all for this video, everyone. Let me know in the comments how your Abyss runs went and what teams you used. And if this video helped you out, don't forget to leave a like, consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you all soon. Take care!